Okay, so this is part two of my how to make your kombucha. So this is after we finish boiling the kombucha, right? You want to make sure that the temperature of your newly brewed tea is acceptable, right? Because you're going to be mixing in with your leftover tea from your previous brew. Here's my mother. So what I do is first you just take a digital thermometer and you put it in here just to be aware of what the temperature is in here. So this should be room temperature, right? That's at 73 or about there. Now this, the, and I cleaned the tip of this, by the way, it's much higher. So even though this seems warm, this, if you mix this, you might create a shock against your existing SCOBY. So you want to kind of make sure that the temperatures between your new tea and your existing SCOBY are equilibrized a little bit. So this would be too high. I would continue and lower the temperature of this new tea. Hi, so I decided to make another part two. I did part one of this video. That's the original how to make kombucha by a dude with 9+ years of beer brewing experience. But I wanted to make part two, and this part will show you how to actually how to start your new batch of kombucha, right? So you always want to leave some of the old kombucha from your previous brew. So I split it in my two jars, and there's actually two scobies in here. I'm going to remove them, take them out, and show them to you in a second. But I've also convinced a friend of mine to get into the hobby, right? So again, I'm holding my cell phone with one hand, right side, one hand. So I've already detached a SCOBY, a piece of a SCOBY in there. I put it in there. And this will get them started. And the best way to get started is to ask someone. If you know someone who has kombucha, ask him, because it will get you started with a healthy kombucha SCOBY. If you don't know anyone, you can buy kombucha SCOBYs. If you go to beer brewing website, or maybe there's one close by you, they usually now sell SCOBYs for kombucha as well. There is one nearby where I live. It is, however, I'm going to tell you right now, a single kombucha SCOBY was $29 plus tax. So you will pay around $33 for a single SCOBY. For this reason alone, it's better if you know someone who has kombucha, when they're at this stage right now, ask him to make you a starter. That's what this is, right? So that's the first thing I want to show you guys. The second thing is I always check, and by the way, I clean the tip of this thermometer. I always check what the temperature is of my existing kombucha. So it should be room temperature, of course. It's about 74 degrees Fahrenheit, or around 75 or so. That's good enough. And then my new batch, which is in here, after it cools down, and you can have it cool down naturally just by sitting like this, but it will take hours. If you leave it on your stove, this will take many hours, or you can decrease that time by doing an ice bath, which is what I did in here. Or not even an ice bath, just fill this with cold water, put it in here, and that will substantially decrease the amount of time this will take. And then I don't assume anything. I verify that this has decreased to the appropriate temperature before I introduce it to my existing SCOBY, because I don't want to introduce a shock against it. I want this to be a smooth transition. So the other one was about 73 and change. This is close enough. I mean, it's almost exactly the same. So that's the first thing I do. And then again, because I only have one hand and it's difficult, I cannot lift. This is heavy. Heavy. I don't have anyone helping me to film this at this moment. Basically, you will through a strainer too, because there's loose tea floating in here. I used loose black tea, so maybe you want to put a strainer on top of here. But basically, you just want to fill these containers up to appropriate level, split them up, and that's it. And then, like I said before, what works for me is I just put the lid on top of it like this. right? And that's it, just loosely. I don't screw it in, and this helps it to breathe, and it starts to do its job, right? The SCOBY, you gave it new food, new tea, new sugar. It goes and starts to consume it. It creates small amounts of alcohol and CO2 gas. It creates positive pressure, and then that CO2 gas slowly comes out of here. Once in a while, you can open the lid, take a look inside, make sure everything's good, put the lid back on like this. The key is not to screw it on. And this will also help. I will do the same thing with this guy. I just put it on like that. All right, and then when it's ready, my friend comes over. During transportation, he can close it for a few hours, it'll be fine. And when he comes home, he can unscrew it, and then his starter will be ready to go to make a bigger batch, so he can develop a thicker SCOBY like this. So I'm going to pause this video and then transfer the tea, and then show you guys how that looks. I've transferred the tea. I had to put my phone down, but now, so this one is ready to go for my friend. I use a strainer because I use loose tea, so I just put it on like that, and I pour it in slowly like this. This gets rid of any of the tea. You guys can see, I used half an ounce of tea, a little bit more than half an ounce in my recipe. I don't know how many tea bags that translates to if you use tea bags, but I like to use loose tea, and I buy a loose tea in a loose tea format. But basically, so now I will transfer one of the SCOBYs and show you guys how that kind of looks like. It's a little bit slimy, but don't get, this is actually two. Let me take one of them out. See, nice and healthy, nothing funky about it. And I'll transfer this guy in here. Another thing is, a lot of people say that you kind of want to ensure that your SCOBY is slightly below the level. I mean, it will develop gas bubbles and might float to the top, but if you can remove those gas bubbles, I believe that has a benefit, because then it doesn't get exposed to any potentially harmful things that could be at the top. And then I usually inspect the SCOBY with my hands. It's a little bit slimy, but don't let that discourage you. That's just the way nature works. Nature works like that. So you guys can see, here's one SCOBY, here's the other SCOBY, and then Max, a friend of mine. So Max, if you're watching this video, it doesn't take a lot to start. This is your SCOBY. This will create your mother. And then also I gave you some pre-existing tea from the other batch, and then new tea batch. So this will let this sit for a few weeks, and it will develop, not even maybe 2-3 weeks, it will develop a mother at the top, a new layer, and then just basically start a layer, transfer it to a bigger vessel, wherever you want. Just so you know, these are 1-gallon jugs. I bought them at a brewing store. I really like these a lot. I like these a lot. I wasn't able to find ones like that at a regular store, but my brewing store now carries a lot of things, not just for brewing beer. They do cheese, they do kombucha, they do all kinds of, now they're getting into all kinds of fermented foods, so they're expanding what they're carrying in there. That's basically it. I'll put this lid on, like I said, like that, kind of at an angle maybe, like this, and then the last step is to find a nice, cool, dark place. You don't want to expose this to sunlight for the fermentation duration, for the duration of the fermentation. I guess I said that in the reverse. Light does bad things to both kombucha over time and beer. It might create it, make it skunky, and create a skunky smell, and ruin it potentially if it's exposed to sunlight for a long period of time. Here, what I'm doing here, that's fine for an hour or two, but I'm talking about exposed for light for weeks or months. They might do some funky stuff to you, to your SCOBY. So the way I got started it, I basically went to a store and bought a drink. There was some sediment on the bottom of the bottle. So you can get started like that. Pick up the bottle, make sure it's a good quality SCOBY. Look if there's some sediment on the bottom. Well, even if there isn't, there's supposed to be a lot of active probiotic bacteria, billions of them. It's advertised on the label. It should be in there. And basically, you drink 90% of your bottle, leave a little bit. And with that, I started a starter like this, but I already have this SCOBY developed, so I'm going to use that for my friend. Basically, that's what I did. I didn't spend $30 at the brew store, but if you want to support the company crew Crazy Scobies, and if you and you know a starter like the one I described, I may will take some month to start, and then from that you go to a bigger one that takes another 3 weeks. If you want to save time, it will take you about 2 months to get to that point. If you're not in a hurry, that's fine. But if you want to get there sooner, you should get a SCOBY. Okay, so that's pretty much what I want to show you guys. This is basically part 2, and that concludes SCOBY and Kumbocha explanation. Again, here's my recipe, but I encourage to find what works for you. I'm going to put this away into my dark room and let it ferment for a week or two. Thanks.